Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Life. I'm Stephen Long, and my guest, continuing actually, is Sean Davis. Sean was on the last show, but just there's too much to talk about. So we asked him to stick around, and he's still here with us. Sean, we were talking about your book, The Wax Bullet War. Got an explanation of where the title came from. What are the contents of that? What does it cover?
Well, yeah, the book covers from when I joined, re-enlisted in the military the day after 9/11, which was funny in itself, you know, because there's a lot of these kids that joined the military. We had such a long period of peace that they joined the military thinking that they could just get the college money and get out.
Sure.
So I walked in there to sign up. There's a lot of kids like, I want out of this. You know, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, get out of the way. I'm going to sign up again. So
you'd been there. You'd done your service. And,
yeah, 6 years, the regular Army, and now I went back. And so that's funny. And then trying to reintegrate into the military and finding that, you know, I loved it. I loved the action. I loved the adventure. I loved being, doing things that are a little dangerous, you know?
Yeah.
And so going from there to Iraq, you know, getting hurt, losing some guys in our company, in our battalion, and then coming back and trying to make sense of life. And then going down to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of ways, that was some different trauma, definitely, but in some ways it was worse. You know?
Now, were you in the military then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Still Oregon National Guard. The joke was that they hoped that nothing went wrong with the space shuttle because they would have sent us up to the moon because they kept sending us to all these different places, you know.
Because you said you were in Haiti as well.
Yeah, I was in Haiti. That was back in 1995, and during the revolution where they ousted Aristide. And that was a real crazy eye-opener for a kid like me that grew up in, you know, the mountains of Oregon. So all of a sudden I'm in Haiti where no one can speak the language that I speak. Everybody looks completely different. The culture is different. The religion is different. It was a huge shock.
Yeah. Did you feel targeted or just different?
I felt completely different, but when you feel that different and you're someplace that you don't want to be, it's so easy to demonize the people that are around you. You know, you start hating them because, like, why can't they run their own country? It makes me come here, you know, and I don't understand them. And that was the reason why, how I felt in Haiti, the fear and just, it was mostly fear, but anger as well. I wanted to make sure that my guys, because I went to a leadership position when I was in Iraq, so I wanted to make sure my guys didn't feel that way when we went to Iraq. So before we went to Iraq and deployed, I learned Arabic to, I can speak it like maybe a 5-year-old could speak it, but it was enough. I read about the history of Iraq. You know, I would carry around this book called The History of Iraq for Dummies, and everybody would make fun of me for having this book, but everybody wanted to know what was in that book.
You bet.
Yeah. And then
it's a huge history.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the history is caused by us, United States.
Sure.
You know, after World War II and the mandate system, and then kind of carving up the lines in the sand and saying, "You guys are a country now, go." And so, a lot of the guys didn't know about that, and so we went there knowing that, for the first few months I was there, we didn't have translators, and so they used me as a translator.
Oh boy!
And I would go. I didn't understand half the things they're talking about, but I could understand through body motion and whatnot. But a lot of the units that we were over there didn't know how to say hello or thank you. You know, all they knew was pointing a gun, and when you speak that language, you know, you're going to get that language back.
Right.
And so when you're able to speak it, it helped us out a lot. And so that was something that was unique about us. And then getting hurt and sent back and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, it was really difficult, you know.
So I kind of skipped over the Katrina thing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, you know, I said it in a lot of ways it was worse than war, is because when you are in what appears to be, you know, post-apocalypse or a third world type of country, and it's your own, and you can read all the signs that have fallen over, all these cars that are flooded out are the cars that your friends drive at home. You know that you're in your own country, and it's that type of destruction on that scale. It was really devastating in a lot of ways. The death just floating in the waters. You'd see a dog starving and dying of thirst, drink from the water in the morning, dead at night. Because of what was in those waters. Going house to house, we did find some holdouts. One of the worst things that I found in New Orleans, we kicked the door down, was a man who had killed himself because he was so scared of the storm. I guess he was in his underwear. He had saran wrapped a piece of paper with his name, date of birth, and social security number to his left leg, and he shot himself in the head.
Oh my gosh!
And we found him, was it 2 weeks later? And so it was some horrible things up there as well. And so I went to that deployment thinking that it would make my life make sense after the Iraq deployment.
Right.
So I just found out, I can't do this anymore. And that was a really difficult thing because learning how the warcraft was my entire adult life to that point, except for the couple years that I'd taken off. So I spent a total of about 13 years in. And then all of a sudden trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be if I can't be that person was really difficult.
Sean, how do you transition from that to teaching? That seems like such a leap.
Well, here's my thing. I was in the infantry for the whole time, so I figure, I'm done using my back and my leg muscles. Maybe I should use the muscle I haven't used in a while.
Okay.
So I went to the VA and they asked me what I want to do, and I said I want to teach college.
Great.
And they actually, because I had some brain trauma, they made me take a lot of tests to make sure that I can actually retain the information.
Do the work.
Yeah, and then I treated college like I did any other mission in the military, and I went straight through. In 5 years, I had my master's degree, and I had and a book out. So.
All right. Well, that's really where we're going. Tell me about the book. We talked a little bit about it, but what are the contents? Why did you do it? What was the motivation to do it? Was this a healing process?
Yeah,
Was it just was it passing along your experience or information?
Yeah, initially it was a healing process.
Okay.
And that's why I do the writing through trauma classes, because at first I had this huge thing inside me I needed to get out. I had to get it out, and I found writing was the best way. I can sit there. At first, people would ask me about it because it felt, especially like my friends who were in college who didn't go over.
Right.
Like if I know somebody who went, then I can feel a little bit more invested in what's going on. So I want to know what happened. But then they quickly realized that they didn't want to know what happened. Right. When I start talking about the people that we lost, and every combat mission that you do over there, there's at least 2 or 3 war orphans running around that are 3 or 4 years old, and you talk about that, and people are like, I don't want to hear it anymore. I'm sorry. I appreciate what you went through, and I'm sorry that you went through that, but I can't hear this anymore. And so I found maybe talking about it isn't the best thing.
Well, it's got to be isolating for you then.
Yeah. But writing about it helped out. And at first, I couldn't just sit down. I had to write everything in third person. I had to write everything in very passive language. I couldn't use a lot of action verbs. I wanted to just step back and be an observer, a very non-emotional observer to what I went through, And then I had to rewrite, and finally there was I had to make that decision whether I wanted to make it a first person or a third person book, and it seems ridiculous as for a memoir. But to make it that first person and say, I went through this and I did this and this is my story, it was tough because it makes you relive it all over again,
I wonder if doing that, because I think that's a technique in therapy, is to make somebody do that until it becomes less traumatic. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I thought that I've heard that.
But just get it out and get it on paper. And so once it's out there like that, and then you're like, well, I did this, and maybe I can maybe, and it wasn't impossible, because sometimes we'll think like, I can't do it, it's too
Right,
hard.
right.
But if you put it out in your third person, you're very unattached to it, then you're like, I did it. I got that first thing out. Maybe I can go a little further. Maybe I
Okay.
go a little closer. I
Okay.
can go a little closer. And that's pretty much my process
Okay,
as well.
and now you teach that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
we'll be teaching
a
that.
couple of things. I know you teach it now anyway, but that's your presentation at Terroir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Without too much of a spoiler, can you kind of take us through that? What it's going to be like?
Well, I'll tell people. I always like to start with my own story to make, to let people know, like, hey, listen, I'm in it too. But I also like to let people know that you don't have to have been in combat to have trauma in your life. Trauma is a matter of perspective. It really is. And everybody lives through it different. And it's hard to live this life without some sort of trauma. And then once we get to know each other, you really have to set up like a very an atmosphere of trust. No one's gonna say like your experience is not as much as bad as mine was. What are you
Okay.
talking about? And then once we do that, we'll do a couple of writing prompts. Nothing too close and too painful at first. We'll try to write it maybe third person. Maybe we'll write it in some passive voice, and that's fine. And then we'll see. People want to share it a little bit. We'll talk about it a little bit more, and then and that takes a while. And then in the end, I always want to leave with letting people know what they can do next, and let them know that their stories. People want to listen to their stories. I mean, it's a huge. I hate to say market, but there is a huge interest. I guess that would be better.
Well, I think that's market's probably not fair. I think it diminishes the importance of it.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
One of the writing tips that I heard, a writing teacher said, first day of class she would go in and tell the students, take out a piece of paper, I want you to write down something really intimate, something that you don't want to share, something that you would be embarrassed or ashamed or afraid to have somebody else know. I want you to write it down.
Huh.
And you can imagine the reluctance to
yeah.
do that. But then once they do that, she says, all right, now tear it up and throw it away. And I think what you're trying to teach in that is at least the first stage of writing isn't sharing.
No.
You can do that.
Yeah.
And then evaluate it. Put it in a drawer and let it sit. Come back to it.
I like to just write about a place. It might be a place that's significant to them, because usually the place that's the most significant to them is a place where they've had some sort of trauma. And it could be either a traumatic event, or it could be a really great event as well. So we'll start there and we'll go from there and see what happens. Yeah.
I took a class with a fellow named Gil Dennis, who is a movie scriptwriter and a director and so on. And he wrote the screenplay Walk the Line about Johnny Cash. And he was interviewing Johnny Cash. And when they got to Gil ask about Johnny Cash's father, he wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's fine. Tell me about your home, where you grew up.
Yeah.
And so when he described the home and so on, and then, well, I used
Can't
to...
help but just, yeah.
Then I sat on the couch and I looked out the window and my dad came. Well, that's how he got into talking about his dad. So
that's
that
how
was
I trick him
place.
too.
Yeah, you trick
by
him
talking.
too.
It's a good trick.
Yeah.
I'm doing that right now. So my next book is through Arcadia Press. It's the history of wildland firefighting, because I fight fires in the summertime.
Sure. Because in your spare time.
Well, yeah, I gotta do something. I get
Yeah.
bored. I think to be a great writer, you have to scare yourself and you have to do great things.
Sure.
And I love to be adventurous. But I've been interviewing a lot of these wildland firefighters, and some of them, you got to ask the right questions to get even if it doesn't look like that's the information that you want to get, you kind of go around a little bit.
You come in.
Yeah.
There's, I've forgotten the fellow's name now. The Art of Racing in the Rain, sorry. And but he spoke here locally, and somebody had asked him, or he related this, that a young person had asked him about how do you become a writer. And he said, well, the first thing you do is get a job on a junk steamer, and then go to Europe, and then hitchhike around, and then, in other words, live. You got to have something to write about.
Yeah,
and
even my writing comp classes in colleges, I teach at Clackamas and Mount Hood community colleges. I tell them, writing, even college writing, collegiate writing, has gotten to the point where you just sit down and you try to type it out right before class and turn it in. It's like that's very academic, and you want to make sure you have the right sources, but use your active sources. Go out and scare yourself. I actually assign my classes to go to UFO abduction support groups around Portland, just so they can sit there, be scared a little bit, and write about the experience, or go to a city council meeting. Or
That'll scare you.
Today it will.
Yeah. Or for you.
So I'm like, get out there and do something, and live, and then write about that for sure.
Sean, it has been a pleasure, man.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'll be there. I'll be at Terroir. I want to come listen to you.
Outstanding. Good. I'm glad
and
to be there.
Folks, all of you too, boy, if you're interested in writing, reading, literature in any form, come see this guy. And Terroir this year is our 8th annual. It's been a big success. We have some great presenters. And it's at Chemeketa. You can register online, and it's terroircreativewritingfestival.com. And there's an online application. I'm Stephen W. Long. You can visit me at the website, contact me through that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Hey,
thanks again. Thank you so much.
Great.
It's great.
Yeah.